Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The night was unusually cold. A sharp wind cut through the city streets, howling past empty alleyways and beneath the flickering streetlights that illuminated a deserted sidewalk. Emily sat alone on the edge of a curb, her knees drawn tightly to her chest as she huddled in her ragged coat. She had long ago lost track of how many nights she had spent like this, hiding in the shadows of the busy city streets, trying to avoid the cruel glances of passers-by. The city had no place for someone like her, someone who had once had dreams and ambitions but now only had survival to focus on. Her stomach growled painfully, a reminder of the hunger she had become accustomed to. Her thoughts wandered back to the days when she had a life worth living. She had once been someone with a future, with a family. But that was before she lost her job, before the betrayal of a loved one drove her into the streets, where she became just another nameless face in the crowd. Emily shifted uncomfortably, wrapping her arms around her legs, seeking some warmth against the bitter cold. As the world moved around her, she felt invisible. Forgotten. But then, a sudden sound, a car engine, broke through the silence, pulling her attention away from the city's distant hum. She looked up and saw a sleek black sedan slowing to a stop right in front of her. The headlights illuminated her worn face, casting a sharp shadow on the ground. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the usual passerby who avoided eye contact. This was something different. The door to the car opened, and a tall man stepped out. He was dressed in an expensive black suit, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he approached. There was a calmness in his movements, a certain confidence that seemed to command respect. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face stern yet handsome in a way that suggested power and control. Emily felt a pang of unease ripple through her, but she couldn't help but be curious about this stranger. He stopped in front of her, his eyes scanning her with an almost analytical gaze. She instinctively shifted, trying to hide the tattered remains of her coat, but the man wasn't looking at her clothes. He was looking at her, intently, as though she were a puzzle he intended to solve. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The streetlight buzzed faintly overhead, and the wind continued its mournful whistle. Then, the man's voice broke the silence. His tone was smooth, controlled, yet it held an underlying edge that made Emily sit up straighter. "I have a proposition for you," he said. Emily blinked, momentarily taken aback. "A proposition?" she asked, her voice rough from lack of use. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm sure you're aware of the state you're in. I can help you. I can offer you a way out of this life." He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "All I need from you is one thing in return." Her mind raced. She had heard this kind of offer before, from people who preyed on the vulnerable. The idea of a way out was always tempting, but it never came without a catch. She had learned to be cautious, to question every offer that seemed too good to be true. But something about this man made her pause. Was it the way he spoke? Or perhaps the sharpness in his eyes, as though he were testing her, sizing her up for something bigger than just charity? "What do you want?" she asked, her voice a little more guarded now. The man took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. "I want you to have my child," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. The words hit her like a thunderclap, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at him, her mind struggling to make sense of what he had just said. Was he serious? "I beg your pardon?" Emily asked, unable to keep the incredulity from her voice. "You want me to have your child?" He nodded, as if it were the simplest request in the world. "Yes. I'll pay you handsomely for it. A house, food, all the essentials you'll ever need. All you have to do is agree." Emily's mind raced. She had heard of surrogacy arrangements before, but this felt different. This wasn't a contract with a medical facility. This wasn't a professional arrangement. This was personal. And something about it felt wrong. "Why me?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "Why would you want someone like me to carry your child?" The man's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of something she couldn't quite place. Then he spoke again, his tone softer but still firm. "Because you're the perfect candidate. You're willing, and I believe you're strong enough to handle it. You have nothing, and I can give you everything." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "All you need to do is carry my child. The rest will be taken care of." Emily swallowed hard. The words sounded too good to be true, but the reality of her situation weighed on her. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Her clothes were ragged. She had nothing. She had no choice but to consider this offer, no matter how strange it seemed. "But what's the catch?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. "There's no catch," the man replied smoothly. "I'm offering you a deal. You'll carry the child, and I will provide for you. But there's one condition: once the child is born, it will stay with me. Forever." The finality of his words settled in the air between them, and Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She tried to imagine the future, what it would mean to give birth to a child that would never be hers. To carry a child for someone else, knowing she would never have the chance to raise it. But the man's offer was tantalizing. He was offering her everything she needed: shelter, food, and security. "You'll be compensated for everything, of course," he added, as if sensing her hesitation. "I'll give you a life you could never imagine. All you have to do is say yes." Her eyes darted to the black sedan parked beside them. She thought about the life she could have: luxury, comfort, no more nights sleeping in the cold. Her hands trembled as she grasped the edge of her coat, torn between doubt and the lure of a better future. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice softer now. "Why not someone else?" The man smiled, though it was more of a calculated smirk than a genuine expression. "Because you are the one who needs it the most," he said. "And because you'll never know what's truly at stake." His words lingered in her mind, unsettling her further. But the promise of a life without pain, without struggle, was enough to override her doubts. She nodded slowly, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of the situation. "All right," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I'll do it." The man's smile widened, and he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small contract. He slid it across the cold pavement toward her, the paper almost seeming to glow in the dim light. "Sign here," he instructed, his voice businesslike now. Emily hesitated for a moment, staring at the paper. She didn't know what she was signing, but she had no choice. The hunger inside her felt like a beast that needed to be fed, and this was the only way. With a shaking hand, she took the pen and signed. It had been 3 days since Emily had signed the agreement, and already, her world had shifted in ways she hadn't imagined. The mansion that now stood before her, its towering white columns and perfectly manicured lawns, was a far cry from the cold, unforgiving streets she had once called home. The driver had taken her here in a sleek black SUV, the silence inside the car almost oppressive. It wasn't until the vehicle came to a stop in front of the grand estate that she truly realized the enormity of the decision she had made. As the door opened, the driver gestured for her to step out. She hesitated for a moment, her hands trembling as she gripped the handle of the car door. She could still feel the weight of the contract in her mind, the promise of a better life, but at what cost? She had agreed to something so strange, so foreign, that a part of her still struggled to grasp the reality of it. But when the cold air hit her skin, and she looked up at the house, she could feel a sense of hope stir within her. It was hard to ignore the allure of a life of comfort, the warmth of a home, something she had been without for so long. Yet as she walked toward the door, a nagging feeling twisted in her stomach, making her question whether this was truly the escape she had been hoping for. The door swung open before she could knock, and a tall woman stood there, her expression polite but distant. She had dark hair, slicked back into a tight bun, and she was dressed in an immaculate uniform. "You must be Emily," she said, her voice crisp but welcoming. "Yes, I am," Emily replied, her voice soft. I didn't expect such a big place." The woman smiled faintly, stepping aside to allow her entry. "Mr. Donovan prefers privacy, but you'll be taken care of. Please follow me." Emily nodded, stepping inside the grand foyer. The interior of the mansion was just as lavish as the exterior, rich wood paneling, towering bookshelves, and intricate chandeliers that cast a soft, golden glow on the marble floors. It all felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. "Please, this way," the woman said, leading Emily down a long hallway that seemed to stretch forever. As they walked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led into something she didn't fully understand. They reached a large room that seemed to be the heart of the house. It was a sitting room, tastefully furnished with plush chairs and soft lighting. The woman gestured for Emily to sit. "Mr. Donovan will be with you shortly," she said before turning to leave. "Make yourself comfortable." Emily sat down, her mind racing. She had no idea what this man's intentions were, nor did she understand what had led her to this moment. What was the real reason behind his offer? He had promised her security, but at what cost? Minutes later, the door opened again, and the man she had met on the streets, the man who had made the strange offer, stepped inside. His presence filled the room, and Emily felt an immediate sense of unease. There was something about him that unsettled her, something that went beyond his wealth and his calm demeanor. "Good evening, Emily," he said, his voice smooth as always, but there was something colder in it now. "I trust you've settled in." "I've only just arrived," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "But yes, it's a lot to take in." He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's all yours, for as long as you keep your part of the deal. Now, we'll begin the process. We have a few things to discuss." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had no idea what he meant by, begin the process, but something told her this was only the beginning. As he took a seat across from her, his eyes never leaving hers, she felt a growing sense of discomfort. "I want to be clear with you, Emily," he said, his tone suddenly more serious. "What we're doing is not a simple transaction. It's a very delicate arrangement. This child is important to me, more important than you may understand right now." Emily blinked, unsure how to respond. "What do you mean?" "I thought this was about helping me, about providing for me." "It is," he replied, his voice steady. "But it's also about something else. There's much you don't know. Things that I'm not at liberty to explain just yet." The weight of his words hung in the air, and Emily's unease deepened. What was he hiding? Why couldn't he just be upfront with her? She had agreed to carry his child, but she had no idea what she was truly getting into. "I'm sure you have questions," he continued, leaning forward slightly. "I'll answer them as best as I can. But first, we need to discuss the terms. You'll be monitored closely during your pregnancy. There will be regular checkups, tests, and routines that you must follow. This is not just for your well-being, but for the child's as well." "Tests?" Emily repeated, her voice faint. "What kind of tests?" He didn't elaborate, but his gaze was unwavering. "Just medical assessments. I need to know that you're capable of fulfilling your end of the bargain." Her heart began to race. The more he spoke, the more it felt like she was being pulled deeper into something she couldn't escape. She had expected to be cared for, but this was something else entirely. She hadn't signed up for constant surveillance, for being treated like a mere vessel. "Do you understand?" he asked, his eyes cold but calculating. Emily nodded slowly, though her mind was reeling. "Yes. I understand." The man smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good. Now, I'll leave you to rest for the night. We'll begin the process in the morning. There's no going back from here, Emily. This is your new life. He stood, and Emily followed suit, though her legs felt like lead. As he walked toward the door, he turned back to her. One more thing, he said, his voice soft but laced with an eerie undertone. I trust you will keep everything between us. No one else can know about this arrangement. If anyone finds out, it could have consequences. The door clicked shut behind him, and Emily was left standing in the silence of the massive room. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, the reality of what she had agreed to sinking in. She was trapped. The following morning, Emily awoke to the soft sound of a bell ringing in the distance. It was a sound unlike anything she had heard in the streets. The sun streamed through the large windows, casting warm golden light across the plush carpet. She could hear the gentle hum of a vacuum cleaner somewhere outside the room. The house seemed alive with quiet activity, a stark contrast to the lifeless world she had left behind. She sat up, her head heavy with the remnants of uneasy sleep. The bed she was in felt too soft, too comfortable, as if it belonged to someone else. She ran her fingers over the satin sheets, trying to grasp the reality of it all. Just days ago, she had been wandering the streets, desperate and cold. Now, she was in a mansion, provided for, protected, but at what cost? She glanced over at the door. It was slightly ajar, and a soft knock sounded just as she reached for the handle. The woman in the uniform, whose name Emily had yet to learn, stepped inside without waiting for a response. Her face was expressionless, but there was something in her eyes that made Emily uneasy. Good morning. Ms. Emily. Mr. Donovan is expecting you in the dining room. It's time to start the process, the woman said, her tone impersonal but firm. Emily nodded, her throat dry. Okay. I'll be there in a moment. As the woman left, Emily stood, her feet sinking into the thick carpet beneath her. She looked around the room one last time, taking in the opulence. It felt like a dream, like something she might wake up from any moment. But she knew there was no waking up from this was real. Too real. The thought of facing Donovan again made her stomach churn, but she knew she had no choice. She had signed the contract. She had agreed to his terms, no matter how vague they had been. And now, the price of that agreement was beginning to reveal itself. She quickly dressed in the clothes provided for her, a silk robe, slippers, and a set of casual clothes that fit perfectly, though they felt foreign on her body. As she made her way down the hallway, her heart pounded with each step. She had no idea what to expect. Was today going to be the beginning of the process he had mentioned? Or was there something else in store for her? When she entered the dining room, Donovan was already seated at the head of the table. His appearance hadn't changed, the sharpness in his eyes was still there, as if he were sizing her up, determining her worth. He motioned for her to sit across from him. Good morning, Emily, he said, his voice smooth and measured as always. I trust you had a restful night. She nodded, though she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her chest. Yes, I did. Thank you. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a glass of water, took a sip, and then placed it back on the table with deliberate precision. I trust you understand the importance of today, he said, his gaze never leaving hers. Today is the first step in your transformation. This is when things begin to take shape. Emily's pulse quickened at his words. Transformation? She wasn't sure she liked the sound of that. She had come here for safety, for protection, but she hadn't bargained for a transformation. What did he mean by that? What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Donovan's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. You will see soon enough. But first, we need to take care of some preparations. He reached for a folder on the table, opening it to reveal a set of documents. These are medical forms. I need you to sign them before we proceed. Emily hesitated, her eyes scanning the forms. They were filled with medical jargon, none of which she fully understood. There were questions about her health, her medical history, and a section that seemed to outline procedures she couldn't quite comprehend. She had no idea what she was agreeing to. Her hand hovered over the pen, but something inside her told her to be careful. Why do I need to sign these? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. They are for your safety, Donovan replied smoothly. We need to ensure that you are physically capable of carrying a child. These tests will confirm that. Tests. There was that word again. What kind of tests? And why hadn't he mentioned them earlier? I don't understand, Emily said, her voice trembling. You said I would be taken care of, but now, this doesn't feel like what I signed up for. Donovan's expression hardened, the warmth in his voice fading. You must understand, Emily, that this is not just about you. This is about the child. I need to ensure that you are fit to carry my child. It's a necessary precaution. You will go through these tests, and then we will move forward. Emily bit her lip, her mind racing. She had thought she understood the terms of the agreement, but now it seemed like there was so much more to it, so much that was hidden from her. What had she truly agreed to? And why did he keep referring to the child as something separate from her? She felt a wave of nausea wash over her as the enormity of her decision crashed into her all at once. She had come here seeking a way out of her broken life, but now, it seemed like she was being pulled deeper into something she couldn't control. There was no escape. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, her voice shaking. Donovan's gaze softened for the first time. He leaned forward slightly, his hands folded neatly in front of him. I understand this is difficult for you, he said, his tone almost kind. But you made a choice when you signed the contract. This is the only way forward. Emily's eyes darted to the papers on the table. She didn't want to sign them. She didn't want to give him the power to dictate her life any further. But what choice did she have? If she walked away now, she would have nothing, no safety, no home, no future. The streets would welcome her back with open arms, just as they had before. With a deep breath, she picked up the pen, her hand trembling, and signed the forms. The following days blurred together. Emily was ushered from one room to another, her life becoming nothing more than a series of sterile medical exams. Every day, new tests were conducted, blood tests, physical exams, and more forms to sign. She felt like a specimen, a mere vessel for something that wasn't even hers. And all the while, Donovan remained as distant and enigmatic as ever. One evening, as Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard footsteps outside her door. The knock came a moment later. Ms. Emily? The woman in the uniform spoke softly. Mr. Donovan requests your presence in the study. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It had been days since she had last seen Donovan in person. Her mind raced with the possibilities. Had something gone wrong? Was she being monitored even now? She forced herself to stand, her legs weak beneath her, and followed the woman down the hallway to the study. The door was ajar, and as she entered, Donovan looked up from his desk. His eyes flickered with something. Was it anticipation? Come in, Emily. Have a seat. He motioned to the chair across from him, and she sat down slowly, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. I trust you've been feeling well, he asked, his tone polite but impersonal. I'm fine, she replied quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he folded his hands together, staring at her with an almost unnerving intensity. You've been through the tests. You've complied with all my requirements so far. But I'm afraid there's one more thing I need from you, Emily. Her pulse quickened. What do you mean? I've done everything you've asked. Donovan's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yes, you've followed the instructions. But now we must take the next step. And this step will change everything. The days following Donovan's cryptic words weighed heavily on Emily. Each passing moment felt like a slow unraveling, and the pressure of what lay ahead seemed to crush her chest. The mansion, once a place of luxury, now felt like a gilded cage. She was no longer simply a guest in his home. She had become a part of his plan, a plan whose full extent she still could not understand. The medical tests had continued, each one feeling more invasive than the last. She had long stopped asking questions. Donovan had made it clear that there would be no answers unless he deemed them necessary. The worst part was the growing realization that she was being controlled in ways she hadn't anticipated. What had seemed like a lifeline was slowly revealing itself to be a trap, one that she had walked into willingly, too desperate to see the warning signs. It had been a week since Donovan had mentioned the next step. Emily had been waiting for it, every moment filled with a sense of dread. Each time she was summoned to the study or the dining room, she wondered if this would be the moment where everything changed. What was the next step? What was he planning for her? For the child? The study had become her least favorite room in the house. It was where Donovan conducted his business, where he seemed to hold all the answers. But it was also where she felt most like an outsider. Every time she walked into that room, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a place for secrets, secrets that didn't involve her, but that she was tangled up in regardless. Today, the woman in the uniform had come for her again, this time with an unusual request. Mr. Donovan has asked for you in the study. He says it's time for the next step, the woman said, her expression unreadable. Emily's stomach tightened. She had expected this moment, but now that it had arrived, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. What would Donovan say this time? What would he ask of her? The walk down the hall felt like an eternity. The house, once so grand and welcoming, now seemed cold and suffocating. Every shadow, every sound, made her feel like she was walking into the heart of some dark mystery. As she reached the study door, she hesitated before stepping inside. Donovan was already seated at his desk, his posture as immaculate as ever. The room, filled with the scent of leather and old wood, seemed even darker today. The heavy curtains were drawn, shutting out the natural light, and only the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated his face. His expression was serious, yet there was a certain gleam in his eye that Emily couldn't quite place. "Sit down, Emily," he said, his voice calm but commanding. She obeyed, sitting in the same chair she had occupied the first time they met in this room. The space between them felt different now, more charged, as if the air itself was thick with unspoken words. "You've been through the tests," Donovan said, his eyes scanning her face. "Your health is good, and everything seems to be progressing as it should." Emily nodded stiffly. The physical tests had been grueling, but she had endured them. Now, her body was becoming accustomed to the idea of carrying a child she would never keep. It was the emotional toll that was harder to bear. Every day she woke up with the overwhelming realization that she was living someone else's life, playing a part she hadn't auditioned for. "I'm glad to hear that," Emily said quietly, unsure of where this conversation was going. Donovan leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Now, it's time for us to talk about the child," he said, his tone turning serious. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when the true purpose of this arrangement would finally come to light. The child. But what about the child? What had he planned for it? "Before we proceed, Emily," Donovan continued, his gaze locking onto hers, "I need you to understand something. The child you're carrying is not just any child. It's a very special child. And I've made certain arrangements to ensure that it will have a future unlike any other." Emily frowned, confused. "What do you mean? What's so special about this child?" Donovan smiled, though it was devoid of warmth. "That's the part I've been waiting to explain. You see, Emily, the child you're carrying is going to change everything. It will change the future, not just for you and me, but for many others. There's a reason I chose you. There's a reason I made this arrangement." The word sent a chill down Emily's spine. The tone in Donovan's voice had shifted from businesslike to something more intense, almost fanatical. The child wasn't just a means to an end, it was something more. Something that had been planned for a long time. But what was it? What kind of future was he talking about? "You're not just here to carry this child for me," Donovan continued, leaning back in his chair. As he studied her with a cold, calculating gaze. "You're a part of a much larger plan, Emily. A plan that will secure a future of unimaginable wealth and power for those who are worthy. And this child, it will be the catalyst." Emily's mind was racing. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What plan? What future?" He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The child you're carrying is the result of a genetic program. A program I've spent years developing. I've carefully selected the best candidates, people like you, people who are at the lowest point in their lives. I've given them a chance to become a part of something greater. And when the child is born, it will be the beginning of a new world." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "This isn't about a child. This is about some experiment. Some genetic program." Donovan didn't flinch. "Exactly. You're part of it, Emily. You're here because I believe you have the right genetic makeup to carry this child. And when it's born, it will be raised to fulfill a destiny beyond anything we can imagine." "But I'm just a homeless woman," Emily protested, her voice cracking. "How could I? How could anyone be part of something like this?" "You're not just a homeless woman," Donovan said, his voice soft but insistent. "You're the key to something much bigger than yourself. And now, it's time for you to accept your role in all of this." Emily felt like the floor was falling away beneath her. This wasn't what she had signed up for. This wasn't some simple arrangement to give birth to a child and walk away. This was a manipulation, a conspiracy, a plan she hadn't even begun to comprehend. "You've given me everything," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "But you've taken everything from me, too." Donovan's eyes softened for a moment, though the hardness in them never truly faded. "I've given you the chance to change your life, Emily. Don't you see? This child will be your legacy. You'll be a part of something that will change the world." But Emily couldn't hear him anymore. All she could hear was the sound of her own heart pounding in her chest, the rushing of blood in her ears. She had never felt more trapped in her life. There was no escape. No turning back. "You're asking me to be a part of something monstrous," Emily whispered, more to herself than to Donovan. "This isn't about a future for me. It's about control. About power." "Call it whatever you like," Donovan said, his voice cold. "But you're part of it now. And there's no way out." The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating her. She realized then that she wasn't just carrying a child for a wealthy man. She was part of a much darker game, one that she had been drawn into without ever fully understanding the stakes. As she stood to leave, Donovan's voice stopped her. "There's one final thing you need to know, Emily," he said, his tone serious. "This child is not just a product of my design. It's the result of a collaboration, one that involves many powerful people. And they are watching. They expect results." Emily turned to face him, the full weight of his words sinking in. She was a pawn in a game she hadn't even known was being played. "There's no going back now," Donovan said, almost as if he were speaking to himself. And for the first time since she had arrived at this mansion, Emily realized the terrifying truth: the life she had signed up for had never been hers to control. The days after Emily's meeting with Donovan blurred into a haze of confusion and dread. His words had shaken her to her core, and despite all the luxuries of the mansion around her, she couldn't escape the growing sense of entrapment that clung to her like a second skin. The child she carried. The child she had agreed to bear, was not just a child. It was the result of a program, an experiment, something far darker than she had ever imagined. For the first time in her life, Emily felt a deep, suffocating fear. Fear not of hunger or cold, but of being completely powerless. Her agreement with Donovan, her decision to sign the contract, had locked her into a life she no longer recognized, and the worst part was that she didn't know how to escape it. She had given herself over to this man, this plan, and in return, he had promised her everything. Yet now she saw it all for what it was, a grand, dangerous manipulation. The mansion had become her prison. The housekeeper, the driver, and the other staff members treated her like a guest, but Emily knew better. They weren't there to make her feel welcome. They were there to ensure that she stayed in line, that she didn't question what was happening to her. Every day was a cycle of medical tests, meetings with Donovan, and moments of isolation that seemed to stretch on endlessly. One evening, after another routine medical exam, Emily found herself alone in her room. The rest of the house was quiet, the distant hum of the mansion's air conditioning the only sound. She stared out the window, her gaze drifting over the meticulously landscaped garden below, but her mind was miles away. She couldn't stop thinking about the child, about the plan Donovan had so casually laid out for her. And she couldn't stop thinking about the realization that she had no control over any of it. The walls of her room felt like they were closing in on her. She had no family, no friends, no allies. She was completely alone in this strange, new world, and the more she thought about her situation, the more she realized that there was no way to leave. She was trapped, tied to Donovan's scheme in a way that she couldn't reverse. And worst of all, she had no idea what the end game was. The mansion's door opened with a soft click, pulling Emily from her thoughts. She turned to find the woman in the uniform standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Donovan would like to see you in the study," the woman said, her voice polite but firm. Emily nodded, her heart skipping a beat. Another meeting. Another conversation she couldn't avoid. As she stood up and followed the woman down the familiar hallways, she couldn't help but feel the familiar knot of anxiety form in her chest. Donovan had made it clear that the next step had already begun, but what did that really mean? What new horrors would he reveal to her this time? The study door creaked as the woman opened it. Donovan was sitting at his desk as usual, but this time, there was a different atmosphere in the room. The air seemed heavier, and his usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a subtle, almost predatory energy. His eyes flicked up when Emily entered, and he gave her a brief, calculating look. "Sit down, Emily," he said, his voice firm. She obeyed, sitting down in the chair across from him. For the first time, she noticed that his hands were tense, gripping the edges of his desk with a force that seemed out of character. There was something off about this meeting, something that made her uneasy in a way she hadn't felt before. "Emily, we need to talk about the child," Donovan began, his voice low and controlled. "It's time to move forward with the next phase of the process. The child's development is progressing as expected. But there are some things that need to be done before it's born." Her heart began to race. She had been prepared for something like this, she had known that the child was central to Donovan's plans, but hearing him talk about it so clinically, like it was just another project, sent a shiver down her spine. "Things? What kind of things?" she asked, her voice tight with apprehension. Donovan's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "There are certain requirements for the child's future. It's not just a matter of carrying the child to term. The child must be prepared for what lies ahead, and that means you need to be prepared as well." "Prepared?" Emily echoed, her voice shaking slightly. Prepared for what? Donovan's gaze softened, though his eyes remained calculating. The child will be placed in a special facility after birth. It will be raised in an environment that is designed to bring out its full potential. You won't be part of its life once it's born. But that's not your concern. Your role is to give birth to the child, to ensure that it's healthy, and then let go. Her heart dropped into her stomach. This wasn't just about bearing a child for a rich man. This was about raising some kind of weapon, some sort of tool to fulfill a plan that she couldn't even comprehend. The thought of her child being taken away, never to be seen again, crushed her. How could she agree to something like this? How could she sign up for a life where she had no agency, no say in what happened to her or the child? You can't do this, Emily said, her voice rising with panic. You can't take my child away from me. It's my body, my life. I agreed to this, but not like this. I didn't know what I was getting into. Donovan's expression darkened. You knew exactly what you were getting into when you signed the contract, Emily. Don't pretend otherwise. This is a business deal, not a charity. I've given you everything you asked for. I've taken care of you. And now, you will fulfill your part of the agreement. Tears sprang to Emily's eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. I didn't know it would be like this, she whispered. I didn't know you were planning something so monstrous. Donovan's gaze softened again, though it wasn't comforting. I'm not asking you to understand everything, Emily. I'm asking you to trust me. You signed the contract. This is the way it has to be. She shook her head, feeling the weight of her desperation. What had she gotten herself into? How could she have been so naive, so desperate, that she agreed to something so dangerous? And now, there was no turning back. I'm sorry, Donovan said, standing up from his desk. But it's too late to back out now. His words hit her like a slap. It was true. It was too late. She had no choice. The contract, the tests, the arrangements, everything had been set in motion. She was already too deep into it. Her life, her future, her very existence, was now tied to this child. And there was no escape. Donovan stepped toward her, his eyes cold and calculating. You'll go through the final stages of the process, and then you'll give birth. And after that, you'll never see the child again. It will belong to me, to the program. Emily's stomach churned at the thought. Her child, her flesh and blood, taken from her. It was too much to bear. The tears she had been holding back finally fell, hot and uncontrollable, as she looked up at Donovan. Please, she begged. Please don't do this. I didn't sign up for this. I can't lose my child. Donovan paused for a moment, as if considering her words. Then, without a hint of emotion, he said, You will never understand the bigger picture, Emily. But one day, you'll see that this was the only way. For you. For the child. And with that, he turned and walked toward the door, leaving Emily alone in the study. The weight of his words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. She was left in the silence of the room, her body trembling with fear and disbelief. The days following her confrontation with Donovan felt like a blur. Emily moved through the mansion on autopilot, mechanically carrying out her daily routines, the weight of the situation pressing down on her with each step. It was as though time had slowed, the moments dragging on endlessly. Her mind couldn't settle, constantly spinning with questions and fears she couldn't answer. Each new day felt like a countdown to something inevitable, a moment she couldn't avoid, no matter how desperately she tried. But in the days following Donovan's cryptic words about the child's future, Emily became more determined to understand the truth. What had she signed up for? And why had Donovan made it so important that she carry this child? His words haunted her, this child is not just any child. It will change everything. What kind of future was she a part of, and why was the child so crucial to this larger plan? Emily's thoughts turned darker. Donovan had told her she would never see the child again after it was born, but what did that really mean? Where would the child go? What kind of people were involved in this mysterious plan? And what were the consequences of betraying the pact she had made? Her days became consumed with these questions. And one evening, as she lay in her room, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of it all grew too much to bear. She had to know the truth. She had to confront Donovan once and for all. The thought of walking down the familiar hallway toward the study made her heart race. She had never felt so powerless, but now, her desperation gave her the courage she needed. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the child. She had to protect it, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had left. As she made her way to the study, she could feel the tension mounting with each step. The door was closed, but she didn't hesitate. She knocked once, then pushed it open, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Donovan looked up from his desk, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, though there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. "I wasn't expecting you." "I need answers," Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. "I need to know the truth about what you're doing. About this child. I'm not leaving until you tell me everything." For the first time, Donovan's calm facade cracked. He set down the pen he had been holding and leaned back in his chair, his gaze narrowing. "You know, Emily, I've given you everything you asked for. You wanted safety, you wanted a way out of your life, and I provided that. I've made sure you're well taken care of. But now, it seems you're no longer satisfied with that. I'm not asking for your charity," she spat, her voice rising with emotion. "I'm asking for the truth. You've lied to me from the beginning. You've manipulated me, and I'm done being your pawn. This child is not just some product of your plan. This is a human being, and I will not let you treat it like some experiment." Donovan's eyes hardened, and for a moment, Emily thought he might dismiss her demands. But instead, he sighed, standing up from his desk and walking slowly toward her. "You're right," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This child is more than you think. But you're wrong if you think I've manipulated you for no reason." Emily clenched her fists at her sides. "Then tell me why. What is it you want with this child? Why is it so important?" Donovan stopped in front of her, his eyes dark with something Emily couldn't quite place. "You still don't understand, do you, Emily?" he said softly. "This child is part of something bigger. A legacy, a future that you and I are building together." Emily shook her head, her confusion mounting. "A legacy? A future? I don't care about your plans. I care about the truth. And you owe me that." Donovan's face twisted into something darker, something colder. "The truth, Emily? The truth is that you're part of a plan that's been in motion for years. A plan that involves the child you carry. The truth is that this child will be the most powerful weapon we've ever created. It's not just about wealth, or power, it's about something much more profound. You're here because you are the vessel, the key to unlocking this future." "What are you talking about?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What future? What weapon?" He turned away, pacing in front of her. "The child you carry is the result of years of genetic manipulation. It's not an accident that I chose you, Emily. You were selected because of your genetic traits. We've been studying people like you, those who are on the fringes of society, those who have nothing to lose. You, and others like you, have been chosen to bring this child into the world. The child will be raised in an environment where its potential will be fully realized. And when the time comes, it will lead us all into a new era of control, of influence." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me this child is some kind of experiment? A weapon? Yes, Donovan said, turning to face her. His eyes gleamed with something dark and almost religious. But it's not just a weapon, Emily. It's the future. A future where the world will be shaped by those who are chosen, those who have the ability to influence, to lead. The child you carry is the key to that power. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as the magnitude of what Donovan was saying hit her. She had been nothing more than a vessel, a tool to create a weapon. And what terrified her more than anything was the fact that she had willingly entered into this plan. She had agreed to this, not knowing what the true consequences would be. And the child, she whispered. What happens to it once it's born? Donovan's face softened for a brief moment, but there was no kindness in his eyes. It will be raised away from you. It will be trained, conditioned for the role it is meant to play. And one day, it will lead the way for all of us. Emily's heart shattered at the thought of her child being taken away from her. I can't let you do this. I won't let you take my child. Donovan's expression hardened again, and he stepped closer to her. You don't have a choice, Emily. The child's destiny is already sealed. You're a part of something bigger than you can imagine. And there's no way out. You signed the contract, and you will fulfill your role. But something inside Emily snapped. She was no longer the frightened, desperate woman who had stumbled into this arrangement. She was no longer willing to let herself be manipulated. The weight of the contract, the years of desperation, it all came crashing down on her, and she knew, with a certainty she hadn't felt before, that she had to take control of her own fate. I may have signed that contract, Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. But I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to let you take my child and use it for your twisted plans. You may think you've controlled everything, but you've underestimated me. Donovan's expression flickered, just for a moment, before he regained his composure. You don't understand what you're saying. You're in too deep now. You can't walk away from this. Emily shook her head, her tears now mixed with a sense of clarity and determination. Maybe I can't walk away from it. But I'll fight for my child. And if that means taking down your empire, so be it. Donovan's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated her, and now, Emily could see the shift in his demeanor. The cold confidence he had always exuded was slipping away, and in its place was a flicker of uncertainty. For the first time, Emily realized something crucial: she wasn't just a pawn in his game. She was a player in her own right, and she could still change the course of everything. I'll make sure the child has a chance to live freely, Emily said, her voice unwavering. I'll make sure it has a future, not the one you've planned for it. Donovan didn't speak, but there was a dangerous glint in his eyes. He knew that Emily wasn't going to back down. And in that moment, Emily knew that the battle was far from over. She might have been trapped in this web of deceit and manipulation, but she would find a way to fight back. She had to. As she turned and walked toward the door, Donovan's voice called out after her. You can't win, Emily. This is bigger than you. You've already lost. But Emily didn't look back. She was done being controlled. Done being a pawn in Donovan's game. She had one chance to take back control of her life, and the future of her child, and she would fight with everything she had. Wait for next part. Thank you.